A waitress served an undercover owner of the restaurant, but when he left behind a note and a tip, she started crying. Mia pressed her palm against the foggy glass door of Rosie's diner, bracing herself for another day of forced smiles and hurried footsteps. The diner's neon sign flickered overhead, faintly illuminating the worn vinyl booths and scuffed tile floors. Despite its flaws, Rosie's diner was like a second home to her. She just wished it paid enough to keep a roof over her head. At 28, Mia carried more responsibilities than she ever expected. Medical bills from her late mother's illness had drained her savings. She lived with a constant twist of worry in her stomach. Rent was past due, the pantry was almost empty, but she tried to stay hopeful. Her mother once told her that kindness would light the way when all else seemed dark. Mia clung to that wisdom, even if it meant parting with her last few dollars to ease someone else's burden. Stepping behind the counter, she found Carla, the diner's manager, standing with her arms crossed by the cash register. Carla's piercing glare seemed to take up more space than her petite frame. "You're late," she snapped, though Mia's clock-in was barely 5 minutes over. Carla was relentless when it came to scheduling, especially if it gave her an excuse to criticize. "Sorry, the bus was..." Yeah? Carla flicked her hand dismissively, not bothering to hear the rest. "We've already got 2 tables waiting. Hop to it." Mia took a steadying breath. Fighting back would only make things worse. She dropped her coat on a hook in the back, grabbed a stack of menus, and headed to greet the first group of customers. She had performed this routine countless times, yet she approached each table with genuine warmth. If people needed a bit of extra kindness, she was determined to provide it. Her first table was a family of 4. The mother looked worn out, and the father stared at the menu as if searching for the cheapest items possible. Mia recognized the signs of tight finances. She saw it every day in the diner. She offered a gentle smile, hoping to lift their spirits. "Welcome to Rosie's Diner," she said softly. "We have a pancake special this morning, if you're interested." The mother hesitated before nodding. "We'll just share 2 orders," she whispered, shooting apologetic glances at her children. Mia's heart ached, knowing how small those portions would be. "Sure thing," Mia replied, jotting it down. "I'll bring some extra plates." Another patron, a regular named Mr. Davies, sat hunched in the next booth. His threadbare jacket and trembling hands told her he could barely afford coffee today. "Morning, Mr. Davies," Mia greeted. "Can I get you your usual cup of coffee?" He fiddled with a few coins on the table. "I'm a bit short, dear. I'll just have water." "Don't worry," she said, smiling. "Coffee's on me." He thanked her, relief lighting his eyes. Mia headed to the kitchen to tack the breakfast order on the pass-through window and fetch that free coffee. Her mind churned. She was already behind on her bills, yet she couldn't stand watching someone shiver through a cup of tap water. Clutching the coffee pot, she returned to Mr. Davies's booth and poured him a steaming cup. Meanwhile, Carla hovered by the counter, eagle-eyed as ever. The moment Mia stepped away, Carla swooped in. "Mia!" Carla hissed, voice low but sharp. "You're not running a charity. If you give another freebie, I'll deduct it from your paycheck. You understand?" Mia swallowed hard and nodded. She had lost track of the times Carla had threatened to garnish her wages over so-called acts of kindness. But Mia couldn't imagine turning a blind eye to hungry kids or freezing seniors. 1 cup of coffee wouldn't bankrupt the diner. Just then, she noticed a tall man settling quietly into a corner booth. He wore a well-worn brown jacket and faded jeans, looking every bit like a traveling truck driver, or so everyone assumed. His name was Daniel, and he had been coming in sporadically for the past few weeks. What no one else realized was that Daniel wasn't just any customer. He was actually the undercover owner of Rosie's Diner. Mia, along with everyone else, had no idea of his true role. Daniel's calm, watchful eyes followed each interaction, silently observing how customers and staff behaved. Mia approached his table, offering the same cheerful greeting she gave everyone. Daniel spoke in a warm, unassuming tone. "Morning, Mia," he said softly, already knowing her name from his prior visits. Could I get a black coffee and the breakfast special? Absolutely, she replied, scribbling his order. She couldn't help but notice his casual demeanor. He never complained about wait times or criticized the menu. There was something kindly inquisitive in his gaze, as if he was measuring the atmosphere of the diner rather than just enjoying a meal. While Daniel waited for his food, Mia busied herself with other customers. The family of 4 finished their shared pancakes, and Mia discreetly slipped a note under their check that read, "Breakfast is on me. Have a wonderful day." She didn't want them to feel indebted, she just wanted to help. By the time she came back to clear the table, they were gone, leaving behind a small thank you scribbled on a napkin. Carla, predictably, took notice. "Mia!" she barked, cornering her as she carried a stack of dirty dishes. "I know you're giving meals away. This is coming straight out of your paycheck." Without waiting for an argument, Carla snatched the check and stormed off to the register. Mia stood there, dishes clattering against each other in her shaking hands. Her eyes stung. She was already struggling, and now she'd be paying for other people's meals out of her own pocket. It felt unfair, but she wouldn't change what she'd done. If someone was hungry, she had to help. A few minutes later, Daniel's breakfast was ready. Mia composed herself and delivered his plate, keeping her usual bright smile intact. "Thank you," Daniel said, giving her a small nod. He took a few bites in thoughtful silence, all the while observing the tense atmosphere. Carla's voice carried from the kitchen, scolding another employee about inventory costs, her tone harsh. Mia passed by with Mr. Davies's coffee refill and forced an apologetic grin at Daniel, as if to say, "That's just how it is here." When he finished, Daniel pulled out his wallet and motioned for the check. Mia approached, expecting the usual routine. But Daniel slipped her a folded bill wrapped around a note. He offered a gentle smile. "This is for your kindness," he said quietly, handing it to her. "And for the meals you've given others too." She thanked him, tucking the folded paper into her apron. Typically, she would open it later. Customers sometimes left sweet thank you messages or small tips. As Daniel stood up to leave, Mia shot him a grateful look, still unaware of who he truly was behind the modest exterior. Once he was out the door, she noticed Carla was busy nagging the dishwasher in the back. Mia took the chance to peek at the note. When she opened it, her breath hitched. Daniel had left a $1,000 tip. Even more startling, scrawled in neat handwriting were the words, "Keep shining your light. Thank you for showing what real compassion looks like. Daniel." Trembling, Mia nearly dropped the note. $1,000 was more than she took home in weeks of wages, especially after Carla's deductions. Tears blurred her vision, and she hastily swiped at them, afraid someone might see. Overwhelmed by relief and gratitude, she clutched the note against her chest. In her heart, she wondered who Daniel really was. No typical customer would leave that kind of tip for a waitress. Yet she couldn't begin to guess his secret, that he was, in fact, the diner's owner, testing the waters of his own establishment. Mia only knew that for the first time in forever, she felt a ray of hope. Maybe she could catch up on rent or pay down part of her mother's medical debt. Her thoughts spun as she tucked the money away, trying to compose herself before Carla noticed her tears. She promised herself she'd honor Daniel's message by continuing to help people. She had no idea how drastically her life was about to change, or that her small acts of kindness had drawn the attention of the very person who held the diner's future in his hands. That evening, Mia trudged up the narrow staircase to her tiny apartment. She flipped on the overhead light, which cast a dim glow on peeling wallpaper and second-hand furniture. Collapsing onto her couch, she carefully took the folded bills from her apron pocket. The reality of the money in her hands overwhelmed her. Sobs rose up, equal parts relief and disbelief. For once, it seemed like life was giving her a break. After drying her tears, she made a plan. She could pay half her rent tonight, buy some groceries, and still put something toward her mother's lingering medical debt. The thought made her breathe a little easier. Before she turned in for the night, she whispered a silent thank you to Daniel's note, promising herself she would keep paying kindness forward. The next morning at the diner, The tension was tangible even before she clocked in. Carla was more agitated than usual, barking orders at anyone within earshot. Mia tried to stay out of the line of fire by focusing on her tables and ensuring smooth service. Yet every time Mia passed Carla, the manager's eyes cut to her apron pocket, as if expecting to catch her stealing. It was unsettling, but Mia kept her head down and soldiered on. Midway through the breakfast rush, another server named Tina sauntered over. Tina was tall, with carefully styled hair and a perpetual smirk on her lips. She had a knack for gossip and rarely had a kind word to say about anyone. "I saw you talking to that truck driver yesterday," Tina said, leaning in conspiratorially. "He left you a big tip, huh?" Mia froze, cautious. "Just a standard tip." She lied, not wanting to stoke any rumors. "Nothing special." Tina raised her brows in mock surprise. "Is that so? Strange, because I thought I saw you tearing up after you read a note from him." Mia pressed her lips together. She didn't know Tina well, but she'd heard plenty of snide remarks from her in the past. "It was just a kind message," Mia replied softly, turning away to refill a coffee pot. Tina's voice carried a mocking edge. "Must be nice, scoring big tips for all that charity work. You know Carla's watching, right? She doesn't like freebies." Mia exhaled. "I know. Just watch yourself," Tina added, tossing her hair. "It'd be a shame if someone misunderstood your intentions." The words hung in the air like a subtle threat. Mia hurried to the next booth without responding, an uneasy chill settling in her stomach. Something about Tina's tone suggested trouble. But Mia tried to brush off the worry. She couldn't imagine that Tina would go out of her way to sabotage her. Right. By late afternoon, Daniel reappeared, once again taking his usual seat by the window. He ordered a simple burger, and fries this time, nodding politely as Mia took his request. She felt her pulse pick up as she greeted him, the memory of his generosity still fresh in her mind. She wanted to say thank you, but the timing wasn't right. Carla was only a few feet away, barking instructions at a cook about controlling waste. So Mia just offered Daniel her usual warm smile and hurried back to the kitchen. During a brief lull, Mia risked a quick glance in Daniel's direction. He was watching her again, his gaze quietly observant. She wondered whether he might be a reporter, there to write a feel-good story about waitresses in small towns. The thought filled her with a mix of hope and anxiety. If he was collecting information, what if Carla found out that Mia was talking to him? What if it stirred even more problems? Finally, she mustered the courage to approach him as he finished his meal. "Everything okay?" she asked, feeling oddly nervous. He nodded. "It's great. You're doing an excellent job, as always." Mia lowered her voice. "I appreciate your kindness yesterday. That was unexpected." Daniel gave her a reassuring look. "You do a lot for people who can't afford it. That matters." Unsure how to respond, Mia started to ask if he was a journalist, but a loud clatter made her jump. Carla, who'd been glaring from behind the counter, slammed a stack of cups onto the countertop. The tense atmosphere returned at once, and Mia mumbled a quick, "Thank you," before scurrying away. Daniel settled the bill, leaving another tip, significantly smaller, but still generous, and walked out. As the dinner rush began, Tina's sabotage took on a more insidious tone. First, Mia noticed napkins knocked onto the floor near her station. Then an entire sugar container went missing, only to reappear behind the register, where Carla insisted Mia must have misplaced it. Every time, Tina was nearby with an innocent shrug, claiming ignorance. The real trouble came later that evening. Mia was tallying up a family's bill when Carla stomped over, face thunderous. "Mia, come to the back. Now." Heart pounding, Mia followed Carla into the cramped office space behind the kitchen. Tina was already there, arms folded, wearing a look of forced concern. Carla pointed an accusing finger at Mia's apron. "Tina found this in the break room." She thrust a wad of crumpled bills in Mia's face. "Care to explain why diner money was hidden in your apron pocket?" Mia's eyes widened. She shook her head in disbelief. I don't know where that came from. Tina raised her eyebrows. I saw her rummaging around the register earlier. Maybe she got tempted. That's not true, Mia protested. I would never steal. Carla's gaze was ice cold. You're always giving out free meals and coffee. Are you trying to cover it up by pilfering from the till? Tremors of panic ran through Mia. She recalled the $1,000 tip from Daniel, but that was in her personal purse at home. These bills were entirely different. Someone had clearly planted them to frame her. She shook her head, trying to keep her voice steady. Carla, you know I wouldn't do that. Please check the register records. But Carla cut her off. Enough. Hand over your apron, clock out, and go home. You're suspended until I can sort this out. Tears burned in Mia's eyes. She looked at Tina, who feigned a sympathetic sigh. Guilt churned in Mia's stomach. She couldn't prove her innocence, and Daniel, her one ally, was nowhere to be seen. Terrified and humiliated, she slowly removed her apron and set it on Carla's desk. Without another word, Mia turned and stumbled into the hallway, feeling numb. She overheard Carla muttering about calling the diner's owner to report the theft. That's when Mia realized, if the owner heard about a theft accusation, he might close Rosie's diner altogether, or fire her on the spot. Worst of all, Mia would lose her only source of income. Her heart pounded so loudly, it drowned out the clanging of dishes and the sizzle of the grill. She grabbed her jacket and hurried out the back door. The cool night air stung her cheeks, mingling with tears she couldn't hold back any longer. The day had started with a glimmer of hope, but now she was on the verge of losing everything. Mia's mind swirled with betrayal, fear, and the painful question of what she would do next. The little money she had left from Daniel's tip might keep her bills at bay for a short time, but losing her job would crush her. Mia spent the next few days cooped up in her cramped apartment, trying to quell the sense of panic that threatened to overwhelm her. Being suspended from Rosie's diner felt like losing her anchor, and she couldn't stop replaying the scene in Carla's office. When she mustered the courage to check her mailbox, she found a stack of bills waiting for her: electric, water, and another envelope from her landlord hinting at eviction if she didn't pay the overdue rent soon. The only silver lining was the $1,000 tip Daniel had given her. Thanks to that unexpected gift, she scraped together just enough to settle part of her rent, staving off eviction for a little while. Even so, she couldn't help but feel guilty. That money should have gone straight to her mother's medical debts. But if she lost her apartment, there'd be no point in paying hospital bills from the street. As the days wore on, Mia felt her spirit dimming. She tried searching online for part-time jobs, anything to keep the lights on, but nothing came up. Word in a small town traveled fast, and rumors about her alleged theft at Rosie's diner seemed to grow more dramatic with every telling. If Carla truly believed she was guilty, a bad reference could shut every door in town. So Mia stayed indoors, pacing the threadbare rug, wishing she had a way to prove her innocence. One afternoon, a soft knock sounded at her apartment door. Mia hesitated. Most visitors were bill collectors or neighbors asking if she had any spare sugar. But when she opened the door, she found Mr. Davies, the elderly customer from the diner, standing in the hallway. He clutched a plastic bag of groceries in one hand and a shaky cane in the other. "And Mr. Davies?" she stammered. "How did you? Carla told me you were taking some time off," he said, carefully avoiding the word. "Suspended. You forgot to give me my senior discount before you left." He forced a kind smile. "So I figured I'd track you down. A friend from church told me where you live." Mia's eyes prickled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Davies. There was an incident and—" He didn't let her finish. "Well, you've always been kind to me, paying for my coffee when I was short. I thought it was only right I return the favor." He held out the bag. "A little something to get you by. There's some soup, bread, a few canned goods. Not much, but I hope it helps." She was too choked up to speak. Finally, she managed a small "thank you," her hands trembling as she took the bag. The gesture reminded her that there were people who believed in her integrity, no matter what rumors flew around the diner. Mr. Davies hobbled away with the tip of his head, leaving Mia teary-eyed but touched. That same evening, Mia tried to call the diner to talk to Carla or at least beg for a chance to plead her case. Each time, the line rang without answer. It was only when she checked social media that she realized a group of regular customers had started an online petition, demanding that Rosie's Diner reinstate Mia. Comments flooded the page, stories of how she had gone out of her way to serve free coffee or slip a few dollars to those who needed it. Seeing people rally around her warmed her heart, but it also made her wonder why Daniel hadn't spoken up on her behalf if he truly believed in her kindness. In the back of her mind, a nagging doubt formed. Maybe Daniel was just a generous stranger who happened to have spare cash. Or maybe Tina's rumor spreading had made him question Mia's honesty. As the days dragged on, her confusion gave way to frustration. Late one night, as Mia tossed and turned on her couch, she spotted headlights beaming through her thin curtains. Heart pounding, she peeked outside. A familiar brown jacket emerged from the driver's seat of a sleek car, Daniel's jacket. Mia's eyes widened. This wasn't the old truck she usually saw him drive. And what was he doing here, at her apartment building? Quietly, she cracked her front door open, trying not to alert him. Her apartment overlooked the parking lot, and from her vantage point, she could see Daniel meeting with someone near a street lamp. At first, she couldn't make out the other figure, but the harsh voice that drifted through the still night air made her stomach clench. Carla. They were talking in hushed tones, their faces partially illuminated by the street lamp. Mia strained to catch snippets of their conversation, something about financial reports, staff performance, and risk of closure. As Carla waved her arms angrily, Daniel seemed calm, as if he were in charge. A wave of panic and betrayal washed over Mia. Why was Daniel, the man who had been so kind to her, meeting with the very person who had suspended her? She clenched her fists, fury mixing with hurt. Was he part of this whole scheme to frame her? Did he tip her generously just to watch how she'd react, only to let Carla paint her as a thief? Mia felt a sudden need for answers. Overcome by a rush of adrenaline, she grabbed her shoes and sprinted down the apartment steps. By the time she reached the parking lot, Carla's voice was fading. Mia caught a glimpse of them heading toward Daniel's car. Without thinking twice, she called out, "Daniel! Hey, I need to talk to you." Carla spun around in surprise, while Daniel turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Carla glowered at Mia. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. "Shouldn't you be?" "Stop," Mia cut in, her voice trembling but determined. "Daniel, why are you meeting with Carla? What's going on?" Carla's face blanched with anger. She looked like she wanted to protest. But Daniel raised a hand, stopping her cold. He took a few steps toward Mia, calm yet serious. "Mia," he said softly, "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." "Find out what?" she demanded, tears pricking her eyes. "That you've been working with Carla all along?" He shook his head. "No, that's not it." She glanced from Daniel to Carla, feeling every beat of her heart hammer in her chest. "Then tell me, who are you, and why have you been watching me? Are you two collaborating to shut down the diner or ruin my reputation?" A deep sigh left Daniel's lips. He looked regretful, as though he hadn't wanted to reveal his secret under these circumstances. "I own Rosie's Diner, Mia. I've been going in undercover for the last few weeks to see how things run when no one knows I'm the boss." Mia's mouth fell open. She felt lightheaded, as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "What?" Carla's scowl deepened, but she said nothing. Daniel continued, his voice steady but tinged with remorse. "I needed to see how customers were treated, how employees performed, and whether I should keep investing in the diner, or shut it down entirely." Mia's mind reeled. All the moments Daniel had quietly observed, all the generosity he'd shown, none of it was random. She recalled the hush in his tone, his thoughtful gaze. It all made sense now, yet she still felt a rush of anger. "So this was some kind of test?" she asked, tears burning in her eyes. You tipped me $1,000 just to see what I'd do. And then you let Carla suspend me without defending me? Daniel's eyes flickered with sympathy. I never wanted you to be hurt. I've been trying to gather evidence of wrongdoing. I'm sorry if it looked like I abandoned you. Mia's heart pounded. She wasn't sure whether to be relieved or furious. Then why didn't you step in when Tina framed me for stealing? Carla interjected. Because you. Carla, Daniel said firmly, cutting her off. He turned back to Mia. I needed proof. If I had intervened too soon, we wouldn't have caught the real culprits behind the cash discrepancies. I just found out Tina's been taking money out of the till and blaming you. I've been getting my figures from Carla, but I never approved your suspension. Mia stared at him, mouth dry. All this time she had thought Daniel was simply a quiet truck driver. Now she discovered he not only owned the diner but also had been orchestrating this undercover investigation. It felt surreal, like something out of a TV show. Carla shifted uncomfortably. So, does this mean you're not pressing charges against her? She asked, her voice lacking its usual smugness. Daniel gave Carla a cool look. I think we need to have a conversation back at the diner. But for now, he said, turning to Mia, I'd like you to come back to work, if you still want to. We'll clear your name and set the record straight. A swirl of relief, anger, and disbelief churned in Mia's chest. Her life had turned upside down in a matter of days. I don't know what to say, she murmured. Daniel stepped closer, his gaze steady. Say yes. We need you. The diner needs you. And I owe you an apology. Let me make this right. Unsure if she should hug him or scold him, Mia swallowed hard. She remembered Mr. Davies's kindness, the support of her customers, and the $1,000 tip that had kept a roof over her head. Finally, she nodded, tears shining in her eyes. Carla exhaled sharply, looking anywhere but at Mia. Meanwhile, Daniel offered a reassuring half-smile. In that moment, Mia realized the truth. Everything she thought she knew was changing. She wasn't just a suspended waitress anymore. She was a central figure in the diner's future. And although she was shaken, a glimmer of hope began to rise in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, this undercover owner's plan could turn her life around after all. Mia stood outside Rosie's diner the next morning, her stomach roiling with nervous energy. The neon sign buzzed overhead, half the letters flickering in defiance of the early hour. A knot of uncertainty twisted inside her. She had agreed to return, but every step toward the door felt like a gamble on her future. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see Daniel's car in the lot. To her relief, and slight dismay, he was already inside. His sleek sedan sat parked beside Carla's compact car. Steeling her resolve, Mia inhaled and pushed open the door. Inside, the usual breakfast bustle hummed. Customers filled the booths, the aroma of coffee and bacon as familiar as an old friend. But this morning, something was different. At the far end of the diner, Daniel and Carla stood near the counter. A hush fell as they noticed Mia. Carla's expression was guarded, but Daniel offered a small nod, as if to say, "We've got this, just trust me." Mia approached slowly. Her eyes flicked to Tina, who was refilling salt shakers near the kitchen pass-through, wearing a forced, tight-lipped smile that failed to mask her unease. Mia couldn't help feeling a surge of anger at the woman who had framed her. She reminded herself to focus on the bigger picture. Daniel planned to confront everyone today, and the truth would come to light. Carla folded her arms. "Let's get this over with," she muttered, casting a sideways glance at Daniel. He seemed unbothered by her attitude. Mia wondered how long Carla had managed the diner without Daniel's direct oversight. Clearing his throat, Daniel looked around to ensure they had enough privacy. A few employees stood awkwardly behind the counter, listening. "First things first," he began, his voice calm but firm. "I want you all to know who I really am. My name is Daniel Mason. I'm the owner of Rosie's Diner. I've been visiting Undercover for the past several weeks, posing as a customer, to see how this place operates day to day." A wave of murmurs rippled through the diner. Some employees looked stunned, While others exchanged knowing glances, certain customers had wondered why Daniel was always so observant, but none had guessed the truth. Tina set down the salt shaker, her face draining of color. Carla, maintaining her facade of confidence, shrugged. So they know you're the owner now. Big deal. We have a business to run. Daniel raised an eyebrow. A business that's been plagued by theft, mismanagement, and a toxic environment. He let the words hang in the air, and all eyes darted from Carla to Tina. Mia kept her gaze low, fighting the urge to shout, "I told you so." She wanted to preserve some dignity. It's come to my attention, Daniel continued, that certain employees have been pocketing money from the register and blaming others, namely Mia, for the losses. His voice didn't rise in anger. He spoke with a quiet authority that seemed more damning than any shout could be. Tina's hands trembled slightly, and she took a step back, bumping into a table behind her. Carla, sensing a tidal shift, shot Tina an icy look, as if to say, "Don't drag me down with you." But Tina remained silent, lips pressed together. Daniel nodded toward Mia. Mia has been the scapegoat in all this. She was suspended for an alleged theft she never committed. After reviewing the records, thankfully, we keep thorough logs, and checking the surveillance feed from previous weeks, I've confirmed that Tina was taking money from the till on multiple occasions. Tina's face paled, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. It wasn't. I mean, I only took a little. She stammered, looking to Carla for backup. But Carla's expression remained stony, offering no support. Daniel lifted a hand. Before we go into more details, I need to address Carla's role. Carla, I trusted you to manage this diner responsibly. Instead, you allowed these rumors to fester. You suspended Mia without solid evidence, deducted legitimate freebies from her paycheck, and created a hostile work environment. Our customers are complaining, staff morale is at an all-time low, and the diner's reputation is suffering. Carla's cheeks flushed. She sputtered, I only did what I thought was best for the diner's bottom line. By threatening employees? Daniel cut in, his voice taking on a harder edge. By forcing out one of the kindest servers we have? You saw Mia's generosity as a liability, but she's the reason many of our customers keep coming back. He shook his head. This can't go on. Silence weighed heavily in the diner. A few regulars, who had paused mid-bite to watch the confrontation, muttered in agreement. Finally, Daniel turned back to Carla. You're relieved of your duties, effective immediately. Carla's eyes flared. You can't fire me. I've been running this place for years. Yes, Daniel said gently. And I appreciate the years of service you gave, when it was done well. But this toxic culture ends now. I'll pay your severance according to your contract. After that, we go our separate ways. Carla swallowed hard, her bravado slipping. She glanced around, but no one stepped forward to defend her. With a huff, she snatched her purse from behind the counter, storming past tables of stunned customers, and pushed out through the diner's front door. Daniel let out a long breath, then shifted his focus to Tina. As for you, he said quietly, stealing from the register and framing a coworker is grounds for immediate termination. I'll be pressing charges if the amount exceeds what can be resolved amicably. Tina crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered, a quiver in her voice. My bills are too high, and when I saw Mia giving away food, I thought maybe no one would notice if a little money was missing. Her admission was met with a stony silence. Mia felt a pang of complicated sympathy. She, too, struggled with bills. But the choice to steal and frame someone else was something Mia could never condone. Daniel's expression was resolute. I can't overlook this, he said. You'll have a chance to make restitution, but you can't work here anymore. Tina wiped her eyes and nodded numbly, shuffling toward the door. The tension in the diner lifted as soon as she was gone, replaced by a mixture of relief and curiosity. All eyes fell on Mia, who stood stiffly, uncertain how to react now that her name was cleared. Daniel offered a kind smile. Mia, your suspension is officially lifted. If you'll have us, I'd like you to come back And not just as a server. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in. Carla's position is open. I need someone who understands compassion. Someone who can rebuild trust with customers and staff. The diner deserves a manager who leads by example. I'd like that to be you. Mia's eyes widened in disbelief. She had never pictured herself as a manager. The idea of taking on more responsibility, especially after barely making ends meet, felt overwhelming. But the memory of Daniel's generosity and the support she'd received from her customers fueled a wave of determination. I don't know if I'm qualified, she admitted, her voice trembling. I've never managed anything but my own chaos. Daniel chuckled softly, relief etched on his face. Leadership isn't about fancy degrees. It's about heart and integrity. You've been keeping this place afloat with your kindness. That's the quality we need. Mia thought of all the people she'd served, the families she'd helped, and Mr. Davies's sweet gesture of bringing her groceries. She thought of the petition to reinstate her. Maybe being a manager was about ensuring no one got left behind. Feeling a surge of gratitude and hope, she nodded. All right. I'll do it. But I'll need your help. Daniel's grin lit up the room. I wouldn't offer if I wasn't willing to guide you. He raised his voice so the rest of the diner could hear. Everyone, meet your new manager. Let's show her the support she deserves. A few employees broke into applause. The customers followed, some hooting in celebration. Mia felt heat flood her cheeks, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment. It was a deep sense of belonging she hadn't felt in a long while. In the days and weeks that followed, Rosie's diner underwent a quiet renaissance. Carla's old office became Mia's base of operations, though she spent more time on the floor, greeting guests and helping in the kitchen during rush hours. She introduced a pay it forward wall, a simple corkboard near the entrance where customers could buy a future meal for someone in need. Colorful sticky notes soon covered the board, each representing a prepaid meal or a random act of kindness. Within weeks, it became the diner's most talked about feature, drawing even more patrons. Daniel kept his promise of mentorship. He guided Mia through inventory checks, labor costs, and budgeting, none of which came naturally to her. Despite the challenges, she powered through, determined to prove she deserved this second chance. The staff, once cautious about her kindness, began to see the benefits of a nurturing environment. Morale lifted, and some of the regulars who had stopped coming because of Carla's harsh management returned in droves. One quiet evening, after locking up, Mia and Daniel shared a moment at the counter. The diner was empty except for the hum of the neon sign outside. Mia glanced at Daniel. Did you ever think we'd end up here? You, an undercover boss, and me, a manager? Daniel laughed softly. I had no idea I'd find someone so genuine. A person who proved compassion is a business asset, not a liability. She smiled. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. He shook his head. You earned it. And don't forget, you were the one who inspired me. Watching you put others first made me realize that kindness can be the foundation for a successful diner. You showed me how a business can do more than turn a profit. Mia felt tears sting her eyes again. This time, they were tears of gratitude and fulfillment. Together, they walked out into the crisp evening air, flipping the closed sign on the front door. The newly polished windows reflected the warm glow inside, an echo of the kindness that now defined Rosie's diner. As they locked up and headed off into the night, Mia couldn't help but feel that her mother's words had never been more true. Kindness would light the way when all else seemed dark.